Bells of Steel sent me their Blitz Air Rower to review, so I'm putting it up against my Concept 2 RowErg, but that wouldn't be much fun, so I took them apart to see just how similar they are. I pulled off the shrouds, removed the fans and flywheels, compared the chain and ratchet systems, and I even swapped the rails between them, creating my own Concept Blitz or RowErg or something. Did I go overboard? Of course. This channel was never based on logic, and I might have put some parts on backwards and thrown some temper tantrums along the way, but you know what I found? They're awkwardly close in many ways. You can check for yourself. I've linked them in the description, or if you want some real excitement in your life, you could study the pages of notes I took as I analyzed everything on these. But those similarities make sense. Bells and everyone else is trying to copy the Concept 2 since it's the gold standard for rowers. So we'll address those similarities as we go, but there's also some very important differences besides price between the Blitz and RowErg we need to cover as well. If you're looking for a low impact form of exercise, whether that's for endurance, HIIT, or even trying to build strength, an air rower is an efficient, if not brutal, way to do so. And Bells has created a machine that competes for the most part, because depending on what you value in a rower, you may prefer one over the other. But how do you go about testing and comparing rowers? Besides taking them apart, I'll let you in on the excitement. You row a few thousand times and then you repeat it. It's really great. And then once you're done with that and you're sure you're not going to throw up, you do it all again and again. So much fun. So let's tell it like it is. This is a Concept 2 knockoff, and a pretty good one at that, which means you'll be just as miserable using this one as you would any other cardio piece. Before we get too far into this, let's quickly talk about assembly and packaging, because it's an area where Bells hasn't always been great, and I'm not sure if they listen to me since I've been picking on them about this for a long time, but this was actually pretty well packaged. And the instructions to build it were good too. The entire assembly process probably took me a little bit under 30 minutes, which was helped by the fact that Bells actually labeled the hardware for once, and in what might be the greatest feat in human history, I put this thing together using only the terrible tools companies give you with these things. I don't even know what this thing is. But once it's together, just like with the RowErg, you can split them apart again for storage. And while Bells recommends using two people to put the two pieces together, I'm a man who thinks everything is a challenge to my masculinity. So I did it alone. And it only took me like 6 tries because I was kind of having trouble figuring out if it was in the hole or not, but once you've figured it out, it's actually pretty simple. If you're new to rowers, they're easy to use pieces of torture equipment. Now, these are air rowers, meaning they use a fan to create air resistance, meaning the harder you pull, the harder it gets. That doesn't quite sound right. Anyway, I know you dirty CrossFitters are already familiar with Concept 2. I'm joking, of course. I only make fun of CrossFit because I myself can't do it, because I still have my sanity and working joints. So seriously, the RowErg is found in pretty much every CrossFit and probably most commercial gyms you'll come across. It's dominated the marketplace for years, and for good reason. It's an incredibly solid piece. I even traveled for this review and tested a few Concept 2s that have been used and abused in a commercial setting, and across my own unit and the Blitz and all those others, I found that functionally, these two are very hard to tell apart. So let's break down just how close they are while focusing on where those differences really matter and how those things affect performance. Many of the parts on these two machines are so close that I don't think anyone would question if you said they were coming from the same place. The front feet are essentially identical, except the RowErg has little pieces of rubber or a little bit of rubber on the base of their feet, whereas the Blitz has plastic, though I haven't had either of them move on me during use, and their footprints are so close that any differences are negligible. They're both lightweight, though the Blitz is a little bit heavier, but just as easy to move with the front wheels, the chain and ratchet system that pulls them back in. Seems to be the same, though the Bell's chain is a little bit louder, but I don't really notice it over my own crying. And I even did a super scientific test to see if one made more noise than the other, and they didn't, which actually makes sense since the metal flywheel and plastic fan inside the shroud look to be identical, though the shroud and dampers are a little bit different, and we will get to why that matters. The rails are indistinguishable, as is the rest of the frame, and their weight capacities are within 20 pounds of each other. Hell, even their warranties match perfectly, but they can't actually be the same, right? The Blitz is imported, whereas the Concept 2 is made here in the US. Well, here's the thing. The Concept 2 is made here, but some of its parts are sourced globally. So there is a very real chance that some of these things are coming from the same place, but I think that it's much more likely that this is just a very good copy job. And they've copied it well enough that it pulls and retracts just as smoothly as the RowErg. They're both responsive. The seat glides perfectly. I mean, they're sitting on what seems to be identical rollers, and unless you're really nitpicking and paying attention to the tiniest detail, at least during use, they feel very similar. So where do their differences start to matter, and are they enough to make up for the $350 the Blitz saves you here in the US, or $450 worth of moose antlers, or whatever their fake currency is up north? I'd say that comes down to what you value in a rower. So let's do some in-depth comparisons, and we'll start with the less important stuff and work our way up. The pedals accomplish the same things, even if they are a little bit different. They're both adjustable in 6 increments, both allow for ankle flexion. The straps hold just as well on either one once you've kind of locked them in, though Bell's is using a Velcro versus the buckle system on that one. And actually, this strap's a little bit wider than that one, and this ankle support's a little bit taller, but unless I'm focused on how they feel when testing, never actually noticed anything. The seats are a little different, even if they do share a lot of similarities. The shape and size are close enough, but the Blitz is a little bit softer with kind of a different texture pattern versus the more dense seat of the Concept 2. Now, which you like will be based on your personal preference, though my wife and I really find them both comfortable, even if they don't fit our bakeries very well. The handles are close enough that it probably doesn't matter to most, but Concept 2's rubber does reach in a little bit further, and the rubber feels a little higher quality to Bell's, but the shape and ergonomics match. Now, Bell's does have a few more holes in theirs, which can be important depending on how you're using this, but I doubt too many people are doing one-handed rows. Up until now, I'd say functionally, if any of the differences matter, it's not by much, but these last two are where things get interesting. First, let's cover the shroud and the damper. As always, they're close, but this one actually affects performance some. With either one, you could adjust the resistance from 10 to 1, which is going to open or close this spiral damper, which restricts or increases airflow. And even though they are using the same flywheel and fan, or close enough to not really be able to tell, the Concept 2 allows for a little bit more airflow when it's open fully, so it'll be a little bit harder to row at its maximum. If you didn't know any better, would you notice? No, honestly, I can hardly notice going between them, but there is a difference. Now, where there's a big difference is in these monitors. To be fair to Bell's, they were never going to compete with the PM5. This thing is great. It's backlit, ANT Plus and Bluetooth compatible. You can select from pre-existing workouts or customize your own. It stores your results. There's games you can play with it. You can connect it to their app, race others. It's easy to see, simple to use, and based on my experience with dozens of other monitors and cardio machines, this is a great display. The Bell's Blitz Air Runner, though, this thing's a piece of I'm sorry, there's no way around it. It's dim, awkward to navigate, and just poorly done on every level, though it does track all the data you'd expect a rower to, and it technically works, so it's probably as nice as I'm going to be to it. But side by side with the PM5, it's embarrassing. Its one saving grace is that it's Bluetooth compatible, so you can connect to a heart rate monitor, and I just ignore it entirely and connect it to an app and use my rower that way. As for which is the best for you, if you want to save some money, the Bell's Blitz Air Rower is a very solid option. Yeah, the console sucks, but outside of that, it performs very closely with the Concept 2. Now, the RowErg is the superior option, and I say that having no affiliation with Concept 2, meaning if you click the link in the description and buy it, we get nothing. So feel free to check out the Patreon, which I've also linked down there, to make it up for me. Rowing not cutting it for you, watch me equally as miserable in this cardio review here.